Alright guys, Gets Pwned here, and welcome to the first video in my series on wormhole hunting. Today we are going to cover the ships, skills, and fittings needed to jump into a wormhole and begin hunting and navigating deep into wormhole space. So with that being said, let's jump right in. As with choosing any ship and fit, you need to understand your use case. And by use case, I mean what specifically are you going to be using this ship for? Our goal for this series is to jump into wormhole space alone, scan down additional wormholes to explore, and eventually find a wormhole that leads to a system matching specific criteria. So we need a ship that can do that effectively and safely. So let's hop into the ship tree here. And what we're looking for are covert ops frigates. So we're in Amar. So here we have covert ops, and there's two options, and we want to make sure that we're looking at the covert ops, not the stealth bomber. So for Amar, we have the Anathema. Caldari, we have the Buzzard. Galente, we have the Helios. And Mimitar, we have the Cheetah. Also, as another option, there's the Sisters of Eve Astero, which there are some pros and cons for. You know, some of the pros would be you don't need certain skills to be able to operate this. And also, if you look here in the role bonuses, 100% reduction to CPU requirement, a huge 37.5% bonus to your scanner probe strength, and also you'll notice the cloak reactivation delay is 15 seconds versus the 5 seconds for the Empire frigates. So back to the Astero here. Also, the Astero can run drones, which is potentially a good thing depending on how you want to use this ship. For our use case, it's not super important, but it can run them, so you might as well run them. Some of the cons for this is the cost. It's double the price of the Empire frigates. Not listed here, but it has a much lower CPU capability than the Empire frigates, so it's going to be a little bit harder to fit with the modules we're going to talk about here in a minute. Also, it has a much slower warp speed compared to the Empire frigates. You'll see here 5 AU per second. The Empire frigates can warp at 8 AU per second, so you're going to scoot around a little faster in systems, you know, versus the Astero here. But I mean, it's a great ship. It's expensive. When we talk about skills here in a minute, it may be the easy decision for you just to go with the Astero versus the other one. So since I mentioned skills, let's hop into that real quick. We'll look at the ship skills first. So to fly any of the Empire frigates, you're going to need level 5 of that Empire's frigates. So I have Caldari 5, which hence my Buzzard over here in the background. For the Astero, you're only going to need Amar frigate 3 and Galente frigate 3. So if you don't have one of the Empire frigate skills up to level 5, that may be the choice you want to go with, just based on the fact that it's going to take a while to get to level 5 on one of the particular Empires. And also with the Empire frigates, you're going to need covert ops at least level 1 to be able to fly those ships. So in addition to the ship skills you'll need, it's going to be cloaking. So we're going to need a minimum of cloaking level 4 to be able to use that covert ops cloak, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So additionally, we're going to need some skills in scanning. You're going to probably want astrometrics at 4, which will allow you to get into the pinpointing skill. Archaeology and hacking is not really necessary for us right now. Those are for the relic and data scanners, or analyzers rather, which we're not going to be using. But for survey, pinpointing, range finding, acquisition, you're going to want those at least 2 to be able to fit the modules we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Okay, so let's start looking at fits. So I'm going to look at the Helios first. So if you're going to fly one of the Empire frigates, I would probably recommend the Helios because it has a little bit more CPU capability. So you're going to be able to fit all of these, which we'll talk about what we're going to have to sacrifice on the other ones here in a minute. So we'll start off with the high slots. Covert Ops Cloaking Device 2. Must have to have this module fitted. It's the only cloak that's going to allow you to warp while cloaked, so we're going to have that. As far as probe launchers, we have several options here, so let's take a look at those. We have core probe launchers, expanded probe launchers, and then these sisters variants of each. The core probe launcher is only going to allow you to use standard probes, so you're not going to be able to see ships or structures when you're out scanning. The expanded probe launcher will allow you to use your combat probes, and you'll be able to see ships and structures. These sisters launchers give you a nice bonus. It's a 10% bonus to your scan strength, so kind of a huge deal when we're looking at these things. So let's just pop these into compare here. So you'll notice there's a pretty massive cost difference. So if you can afford the sisters, by all means equip those. If not, the standard ones, Tech 1 or Tech 2 will be fine. So we just want to make sure you pick the appropriate one. The other downside to the expanded launcher is the CPU usage. So huge difference here. It's really going to affect the way you fit your ship. But I think being able to see other ships out there with you in Wormhole and seeing if their structures is worth that trade-off, and then we'll just fit our ships appropriately to accommodate those. So moving on to the mid slots, prop mod of choice, whatever you want to run. I have the compact micro warp drive here. You may need to go with an afterburner depending on your CPU skill. As you can notice here, the CPU is going to be pretty tight on these because of that huge CPU requirement of the expanded probe launcher there. So our main things in the mid slots here is going to be these three modules. The pinpointing array gives us a -10 scan deviation, so you're going to be able to narrow down your scans a little quicker. The acquisition array gives you a 10% faster scan time, and the range finding array gives you 5% greater scan strength. So these are really going to help us out. You notice we don't have a data or relic analyzer because we're not going to be doing that in this series here. Down on our low slots, I'm using the nanofiber internal structure 2. This is mainly for just increasing, or rather decreasing, our align time. So if we get into a situation where somebody's trying to catch us, we can align and warp out much faster. I mean, these ships don't have very much tank to them, so might as well just get out, because if you get pointed and webbed or something, you're going to get smoked. So ships are not really designed for that, designed to be slippery and just get away. So looking at the rig slots here, we have the small gravity capacitor upgrade 2, which gives us 15% extra scan strength, and the small signal focusing kit, which gives us 20% faster scan speed. So your increased scan speed with that and the acquisition array over here is really going to speed up our process when we're scanning around wormhole to wormhole. That faster scan speed is really going to add up and save us some time and let us get more done while we're in there. So this is the Helios. You'll notice I was able to fit 3 of these boosters here. If you look at the other ships here, I've had to sacrifice because CPU is at such a premium when you're running these expanded probe launchers. So if you decide to go with the regular probe launcher and not run the combat probes, and then you'll be able to have a little bit more flexibility in your mid slots. But I think it's worth it for what we're going to be doing to have that ability to run the combat probes. So that's the Mars ship. Let's look at the Buzzard, which is what I'm flying. Same thing, I wasn't able to get that third booster in there, and same thing with the Cheetah. You know, just the CPU is just too tight with that expanded launcher. So in addition to these, we talked about the Astero earlier, so let's look at that. The fit is quite a bit different here. With such a limited base CPU on the Astero, we're running a coprocessor and Tech 2 in all 4 of the low slots. Without these, you know, we're not even close to the CPU requirement, and it's mainly because of this here. It's just such a huge drain on the CPU that we have to have these coprocessors. We also have a processor overclocking unit in the rig slot here, so without that, you see we're 108 short of CPU. And having, you know, those 5 modules, you know, gives us the ability to run the expanded probe launcher and everything else we need. Also in the rig slot, you know, we're limited in calibration compared to those Empire ships, so we couldn't run the gravity capacitor upgrade, so we went with 2 of the signal focusing units. So that's going to give us a huge boost with the acquisition array, huge boost in scan speed. So we're going to be able to get quite a bit done very quickly with the Astero versus the others. But you can see these are expensive fits, especially with those sisters launchers. This one's at 114 mil, and the 4 Empires are, you know, in the 70s. But if I was able to choose any of the 5, I would probably go with the Helios. It's the cheapest overall. It allows that third mid-slot option for a booster, and it also has the fastest align time out of the 4 Empire ships. The Astero back down here has overall the fastest align time, and it's able to equip all 3 of the boosters, but it does come at a premium. So in addition to all this with the Astero, you do get a chance to run drones in this ship, so you're not completely defenseless. In my fit here, threw in the Warrior 2s because they're pretty quick and do a lot of damage, and then I threw in an ECM drone as well. It's the medium class. So you can only run 5 at a time, but having 2 sets in there is pretty nice. Gives you some options if you do get tackled and need to do something with yourself there. So Astero's a nice option if you can't get the skills, get something trained up to Frigate 5, and you have the money. Great ship to go with. So yeah, just keep in mind that, you know, these fits are designed for, you know, max scanning buffs and for being slippery. They don't have hardly any tank at all, and other than the Astero, they have 0 offensive capabilities. So if you get caught out, you're gonna lose your ship most likely. But having a, you know, covert ops cloak, having a good prop mod, and with these other ships, you know, having these nanofibers here to decrease your line time, you know, all of that, plus, you know, just solid situational awareness, you're going to be fine out there. And that about does it for this video. Hope you found this information useful and are now able to get yourself a ship fitted out appropriately for wormhole hunting. In the next video, we'll be going over how to use the probe scanner and D-scan, as well as some basic situational awareness. Hope to see you there, and until then, fly safe.